Didn't answer, but we're recording you.
You on?
Yeah.
I want to call the meeting of the Morrow County Commission work session to order, and our one and only item today will be a work session on the capital improvement draft plan for 2027 through 2031, and I'm just going to turn it over to Matt, who is going to deal with this.
I'd like to, Chair, thank you. I'd like to introduce one of our consultants, Brianna Manvers. She's from Pinnacle Architects, one of the, she is what's really driven this. We've got an advisory committee that got preliminary information to Pinnacle, and they really went with the pulling together information and making sure that we had good feasibility and estimates on it. And so she's been great. She's here to be able to answer questions about that and going through. Our process has been since October was having an additional advisory committee identify projects. We had a list of over 30 projects. We brought those to you in December to have those kind of boiled down into what you thought was applicable during the first 5 years. And over the last month, we've been working with Pinnacle and Park Resources to identify and get actual pricing estimates on each of those projects. And what Pinnacle brought together was a great report, some really good information for a lot of projects, and some pretty hefty ask on the budgetary amounts. What we're looking at, if you have that open with the table of contents, we really have on page 1 for these 15 projects, we're looking at a total of $96 million potentially as part of the capital improvement plan. As you well know, there's a common kind of misnomer that we're sitting on a $65 million nest egg just sitting on it. The important part to understand is those are all special revenues designated for different items. A good portion of that is set aside for the circuit courthouse project, which is included as part of the $97 million or $96 million capital improvement plan. What we want to meet today is to review the projects as questioned, kind of set the priorities on that. And then really over the next 2 weeks is we'll be working with Brianna and Kevin with finance to really boil it down to an affordable, fundable capital improvement plan. Right now, as you can see, we're ranging between $10 and $20 million a year. That's simply is not feasible. You know, our current reserves for specific capital is only about in the 20 million mark, and that includes a big chunk of circuit court. The other amounts, we do have stuff set aside for the circuit courthouse, the historic courthouse and others, that those add up in different ways. And as we look at this, we looking at 22 to 20 to 10 to $22 million a year would require extreme financial considerations, and that's a challenge that we have as we look at this. We do have our finance director here to kind of do that, to have a little bit of that discussion. We also have several members of our advisory committee who can answer questions about different projects, and looking at it and just prioritizing so that we can kind of bring this to the finish line and have an option to present and consider this. As we look at this, realistically, and Kevin and I talked, but I really haven't burrowed down to a true number on this. But outside of the circuit courthouse, realistically, we're looking at like a $5 million per year kind of capital improvement without going to substantial loans and funding. We would look at to hold on to current reserves to make sure we aren't putting the county in a bad shape, as well as looking at what we regularly get from CREDS. The SIP funds cover a lot of operational costs, and as we go through. And so pulling from those would be questionable and would have to be a policy decision that would have to be balanced out in some ways. And so we're really looking at TRES-derived funds to fuel your capital improvement plan, as well as any additional funding that we have. Now, one thing with the capital improvement plan, we can put it together, we can start setting funds aside, and then every year as we review the capital improvement plan, we have an update. And we say, how are we doing on funding? We've got this grant. That's great. Continue, plug it into next year's budget. Or you come in and say, winds have changed, push it back 1 year and adjust the capital improvement plan to reflect the realities of financing in this way. However, we look at this, we need to have discussions on what the priorities are, where we're going to invest, and bring this down so we can really look at a constrained and fiscally viable starting point for the capital improvement plan. That's kind of my introduction on this. We do have, and I do again acknowledge Pinnacle. They've ran I can't say marathon because it's more of a sprint over the last 4 weeks of pulling all this together, and they've pulled in their consultants and their team to give us some really good projections on what this is. I also just want to acknowledge the advisory committee that we've worked together. Eric and Vincent were part of that. Commissioner Peterson, he's out sick today, but he was great involved. And then we had Michael Gorman as the county assessor involved in it. Each of them worked very hard on getting their projects and everything as we go through. And so from here, this is a work session. It's a little bit of spitballing. Where do we want to go? What do you want to discuss? As we look at this, we've got a lot of projects. This might be a part where we look and say, okay, this one gets pushed out. Case in point, Heritage Trail, an expensive project. We've already got $2 million set aside for it, and we can pursue other grants. So that's one that, while it's an expensive one, we can phase it out and we can bring it more into consideration as we look at it without impacting the overall CRES or whatever generated capital improvement funds that we're looking to go with. Other ones, weeds building, pretty much we're not going to get grants for weeds building. Those are things that we'll have to make a priority. Sheriff's office, some grants for that as far as emergency management and that, but less. And so looking at that, we have to take those in considerations. With that, if that's okay, I'd like to just have Brianna unmute herself and just kind of chime in on directions. You've dealt with these before and kind of waded through this process. Just see if you have any insight or direction for the board, and also to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. It's been a pleasure working with the committee on this and organizing the information. I think you're on the right track of sort of establishing what exact funds are feasible in annual revenues and working backwards from there as a target, and then backfilling with grants, either outside secured funds and the grants that Park had outlined would sort of bring those other projects more up into the forefront. But the ones that are going to be don't have access to additional funding, sort of prioritizing those maybe separately from revenue streams that could be outside of the county or grants secured. Any initial questions on the information provided? I think, there was a lot of data that was already provided, and then a lot of what we did with the budgeting was either updating or taking the hard costs that were available and rolling in some soft costs. So you have total project costs here, and there are a lot of contingencies, especially the further out those projects are. So And for the ones that don't have feasibility studies, they're more of a high level assumption. And as you move further in that process, those numbers will get refined based on the scope that's detailed in each one of those.
Brianna, could you also just explain the project priority from that spreadsheet on page 1 of the report?
Yeah, as far as how the numbers are working or how they're outlined, I can
Yes.
share. Maybe.
1 second. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Can you see that?
Switching videos. Yeah, we have it.
Okay, perfect. So these are currently ranked over a 5-year period. So the first number is indicating what year it's occurring in, and then the second number is in order of priority within that year. So the circuit court is priority number 1. It's got funding, it's moving forward with construction. So it's happening in year 1 and it's priority 1 of that year. And then the further down, you get there's a couple in here that have an A option, and then the B option is down below because we provided an alternate cost estimate for a different option. So for instance, the Boardman in the main priority is a new facility, but then it's a tenant improvement through Good Shepherd, which is actually a cost savings. And then the roof replacement, this one is kind of the opposite. This looks at just a re-roof project, so it's more cost effective. And then the option B is actually a whole new like sloped roof assumption. And these can be, this initial draft came through conversations with the committee and input. They could certainly be reorganized if there was, funding available or things and you wanted to move those up. That's kind of what happened with the Heritage Trail. It had been a priority like 4 or 5 and it got moved up. And then there are a few things in here that are described on the project sheets, such as the public health building or the sheriff's office, where these first buckets of money are actually like a feasibility study to refine the project scope and actually develop concept designs to inform the cost assumptions that were made in this report.
One other just note, as you likely realize, we don't have the circuit court Boardman annex listed on here. That, as we discussed with that, it's not a project we would coordinate and build, would not be something that we'd be paying for. And so, since the Boardman would do it, the impact on it would be the operational costs that we would assume afterwards. And so that was pulled off of the CIP because it's not a project in that way. So
I can stop sharing too, and certainly let me know if you want it to come back up.
So at this point, this is where we look to the board for input, direction, before Kevin and I really sit down and develop an affordable fit type setup. And as I mentioned, a $5 million a year kind of setup is much more realistically without going to extensive bonds and that. There are some financing items that we can explore without going to a general election to approve. And those should be reserved for specific items that might have a bigger cost that are a priority. Whether that's, that doesn't have other funding options, something like the sheriff's office. and if we want to proceed with that. One thing, and this is something I just want to uh, set up, and Kevin, put you on the spot. Sharon had asked me as we just talked earlier today. Can you explain the process of constraining capital reserves for certain projects as we do that, how that can help protect it, and if it were to change, that it would have to take an ordinance or something that's available for public review or that.
So during the budget process is when we kind of constrain funding for specific projects. We don't do appropriations at the line item level, and most of these are reserves anyway, so they're unappropriated balances until we plan on expending them. But that being said, the way that I've incorporated into the budget, once the budget becomes adopted, then those funds that are allocated to each of those specific projects that we outline, those become committed funds, which is really about the strongest mechanism that the board has. So you have restricted funds and committed funds, assigned funds, and then unassigned. Restricted, that's a restriction that has to be placed by an outside entity, so statute or granting agency, something like that, something that we're just legally bound to and have no wiggle room around. Committed would be the second strongest, I guess, level below that, and that's where the board has taken an action to commit funds for a particular purpose. That can be recommitted by a future governing body or the same governing body through a resolution. I had never thought about doing a commitment via an ordinance and what it would take to modify that, but it would be subject to the rules, I would suppose, of adopting or modifying an existing ordinance. So there'd at least be a public comment and a period associated with it. So outside of exploring the ordinance option, what we have right now is just funds that are earmarked and essentially and committed by the board for specific projects. And just to give a bit of a refresher, in our current fiscal 26 budget, we had right around $6 million in our capital reserve fund committed to projects other than the circuit court building that is currently in progress. So my intention has been, once we receive some direction and prioritization from the board through this process, then as I prepare the fiscal 27 budget, I would change or modify those commitments to reflect the prioritization of the projects by the board, and that would be presented in the FY 27 budget. And just a note on the SIP funds, we county's portion that we receive is approximately just right around $6 million a year in SIP funding. And about half of that is currently supporting operations and operational expenses already. And if you incorporate equipment replacement for existing capital assets, that goes up to about 75%. So most of those current SIP revenues are already committed or being used for operational needs or replacement of existing equipment and capital asset inventory. So it was just to reiterate, we're a little bit constrained from that perspective. So projects outside of what we have available in the now we could, I also would add the $6 million that's reflected in our budget that's allocated to the other large capital projects that haven't commenced yet. The board could spend that down I mean, they've been, committed for those capital projects. And we would still have adequate reserves, for operating purposes. So, I wouldn't be concerned about, committing those funds and moving forward with a project for any of the money that's in the CIP fund currently, if that makes sense. Because we budget reserves in each of our operational funds.
You'd just be repositioning funds. Well, I'll just tell you what my concern is, and then I think, it seems like if you don't do something, I don't have any projections on what future. It appears right now that we don't have the money to do this. I mean, you say 75% money coming in.
Yeah, there are additional SIP funds, that could come in, and typically we receive around $2 million in CRES funds. I don't budget for those just because of the lack of certainty associated, but
Right, putting that aside, let's look at it separate. These, if the other funds come in it just seems like when we have a shortfall in the general operating fund, and it's, well, we'll just go over here and dip it out of this discretionary funds of what we call capital improvement, and kind of call it capital improvement. I mean, we had a budget hole this year, how did we plugged it with, we cut back on reserves, right? Or contingency fund.
so we utilize contingency,
Yeah.
and then beyond in our operating funds, so our general fund, for example, beyond contingency, we have unappropriated fund balances and reserves for future expenditures that it's a little harder to access, but can be accessed if there's a financial need for it. And so, and those are separate from any of the funds that are in the CIP fund.
Well, yeah, those are the CIP of what you basically have set aside those for specific projects, for specific departments already, right? Certain projects, is that what you're talking about?
In the CIP fund. So,
No, just the ones you were,
no, I'll explain it another way. So we have, we don't have a policy yet, but generally speaking, I set fund reserves at 60 to 90 days of operating expenses. And then that becomes an unappropriated fund balance. That's the safety net. So if you look at the unappropriated fund balance in our general fund, it's not designated. Now, it does take like a declaration of emergency or something to that effect to be able to access those in a given year. And then above that, we have some reserve for future expenditures, which are earmarked, non-appropriated funds that are dedicated to a specific department or a specific project.
right,
And then above that, we have operating contingency.
right. And I've heard you talk about that previously. I guess I want to work backwards. Okay, if we say, okay, we want to do these, this project. How do we fund this and make it not, I mean, of course, not impossible, you can't make it impossible, just like you said, but make it harder to use those funds for other things, and kind of, put them in a place where, and then my other point is if somebody comes to us with an ask, or we have a shortfall somewhere and say, well, we need to fill this hole here, or these people want this money here. I've always wanted it to be, okay, if somebody comes with an ask, where's that money gonna come from? It's gonna come from somewhere. You're gonna take it away from another program. You see what I'm saying? That's where I want to set it up when people start thinking about, rather than just thinking, because it seems like sometimes with people who think about the county budget and so forth, it's just, well, we'll just go out the basement. We're locked down there, we'll just pick off a few staff. No, I want to say, okay, you're gonna defund this program to fund this program, you see. And I don't know if You know, you see what, does that make sense?
And so-
I wanna not make you, at least psychologically protect capital improvement, where you have, somebody has to say, I wanna spend this, more money on this, or I wanna support this, or I need to move this to plug a hole in our general operating fund. Well, you're gonna defund the, capital improvement fund, when we're not gonna be able to build this, see? I want that out in the open, rather than just everybody have a mindset, not everybody, certain people have a mindset of, oh, it's just there laying around, it's not gonna defund some other program. You see, that makes sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
The way that I've typically tried to structure it is for those things that come up, or unexpected asks and requests that we're able to go to contingency and not impact other departments. I certainly understand that that's sounds like kind of, you know, what you'd like to avoid. But operationally speaking, you know, we need to be able, to some degree, need to be able to weather unexpected events without impacting other normal, regular county operations, right? Now, if that contingency is exhausted, then I would, you know, at that point is where we're talking about, are we going to reallocate funding from an existing program, or would we go to fund level reserves? And then my third step would be, and I can only imagine this in a really dire circumstance, would be to go to CIP funds. You know, that's largely going to be dictated by how you want me to manage the finances of the county, though.
yeah,
So,
no, and that's fine, and if it's need be, yeah, but I want it said and out there, this is where it's coming from. And I understand the purpose of contingency funds is when you do have shortfall or needs or unanticipated needs. And we've done pretty good. You've kept a pretty good contingency fund to take care of a lot of that. I just want to make sure moving forward, because the other thing I'm wondering, I don't know how Jeff feels about this, is we're not sure what our income is going to be for new SIP projects or new CRES projects, you know. Kind of, Mike's not here, or well, anyway, I don't know, think about a percentage of it going to the CIP fund, you know. And, but I want it to stay there. It may not stay there if we have emergencies, but just make it clear or harder, where people have to express it openly. It's gonna come out of our CIP fund.
today, if we want to move money and repurpose it, so to speak, from the CIP fund, it takes a board action to do that.
Okay,
And that's how it would be going forward in any circumstance. Because once it's in that fund, it's been committed for that purpose by the board. The board's the only body that can change that commitment.
okay.
Might not bulletproof it for future boards in that, but it does still take a consideration and, you know, a notice and being brought up in public meeting.
If I can share my opinion, the best way to safeguard it is pick some one or two feasible projects and break ground and get moving forward on it, because then decision to discontinue that becomes more costly, and has more, you know, negative financial implications, because that becomes wasted or some cost.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my other question I've been thinking about is, would we have an advantage as far as grants and even bonding? If we have a certain level of protected or dedicated funds available? You say,
I'm not sure.
well, you have, okay, and I'm just gonna throw something out there, $10 million project. If we have, and because we've talked about bonding to fund some of this, but we have $2 million dedicated to that $10 million project in capital improvement fund. Is there a way to leverage that? I have no idea, but maybe a grant. I know you
Yeah,
can.
so for example,
Or bond, but let's include bonding. I want you to talk about bonding too. Does that give us a better rate? Or help us if we have 2 million, or just bond the whole thing?
so to talk address the grant question first, because I've got a good example for that. The Heritage Trail Fund, if you recall, the board gave the direction a few years ago now to accumulate reserves up to $2 million with the intention that once we hit that point and we have the master plan done, that we would seek grants and we would be well positioned to have essentially shovel-ready project with ready-to-go matching funds for that grant. And so that's a way that you would plan and leverage the funds that you've accumulated for that. Debt. Yeah, certainly. I guess my concern with obviously and this is purely my financial hat on, right? My preference would be for geo bonds, which obviously result in a tax being levied, so that we have a secure revenue stream. I do feel like that's depending on the amount that we're talking about. I would be concerned about full faith and credit borrowing for a large project right now because of the ongoing debt service requirements and the constraints that we have in our general fund with you know how we've talked about that several times recently. Because that would be it'd be any revenue source would be pledged to cover that, but the default would be general funds. So you could find, if we don't have growth in tax base or collections, year over year, you could find yourself in a structurally imbalanced position that we're trying to currently dig our way out of.
Back to the grant. Are there grants where maybe they're 3 years out? Let's go back to $10 million budget. I think they're day with got it. It's a nice round number. And you apply for a grant. Are any of those grants require you to have the funds at a certain level of, let's go back to the term I use, protected fund in order for them to award you that grant, so that they just don't go, yeah, we'll award you an $8 million grant. You're gonna have 2 million? Oh, that's good enough. Just tell us. Is there any level of a budgetary fund or something that would, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the terms and conditions of that particular grant.
There are such.
Yeah, so for example, if you recall, we've had some parks capital equipment grants where the board has had to adopt and pass a resolution to commit matching funds in advance of being considered for the grant award. That's a case where we have to show that we have the money. Another case, although the process is completely different, is the circuit court building. We have a requirement to show that we have the liquidity to fund basically the project up front, and we do that by transferring the match amount to the state of Oregon for a couple of days so they get a little bit of interest or whatever, and then they transfer it back to us. But again, we have to sorry, I let my personal opinions shine through there a little bit. But that's another case where we have to prove that we have the liquidity to fund the matching component of that grant.
We have it at that point, but do we have it when it actually takes place?
So it generates a commitment when the board adopts that resolution. That creates a commitment.
You're
Again,
ready to get the money.
that could be changed by a future governing body or by the same board, but it would take board action to relieve that.
So if I can also add some points, I know Parks also on here, and they're part of our CIP project. They might be able to help answer some of your questions. I've seen some grants when I was working for Washington State, where the governing body asked us point blank, "Do you have funds? Do you have volunteers on staff and other resources for matching And so once we presented and said we have volunteer hours, these are already, volunteer hours are already spent or accumulated to this point. There's more hours to be processed, or there's more hours for them to work on this project. We have funding up to this point. And all of that sometimes makes it more of a positive light to getting the grant. I think that's probably what you're asking.
It is, you're right, see, that's
Okay.
exactly why I'm wondering, I wanna make sure we have the right structure budgetly, is that a word? Going in to where, because we have unknown funds from SIP and CREZ projects, possibly a pilot or whatever. Have the budget structure ahead of time, so that we wanna commit funds. You see, we can look farther ahead and still stay committed, just like you just pointed out, see? That's all,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I'm thinking. Not selling a particular product, just a structure to accomplish what we want, the best way, that's what we want, and the
Yeah.
cheapest. If the grants are available, we want to be able to get them.
Yep.
You don't wanna not get them because you didn't budget correctly. You know,
Absolutely.
I'll just chime in and say, as a grant writer, I thought the question was well answered, and I don't have anything to add. That you got it.
So we look at this great list,
and now we get down to this.
and this is where the politics comes in. And we really look at it and we ask for saying, okay, where are we at? Now, one of these things comes down, and we have 14 projects here that, as we've looked at it as a CIP advisory committee, these are all very legitimate, necessary projects for the county. Some of them, as I said, are ones that will have less impact on our reserves than others. And so that's the part where we sit down here and say, okay, Heritage Trail. We got X amount of money here. We're going to pursue the grants. We keep it on CIP. We keep pushing it back until we get that grant, and just keep adding a little bit more money in every year until either we pay for it ourselves or the grant flushes out. That's where the CIP does become a living document as we do it. Again, other ones like the toss up between public health and sheriff's office. I'd love to get 2 new buildings for both of them. However, with this, we're looking at, $20 million between the two of them. The sheriff's office is more expensive, and, public health, if we look at it as just a TI with a partner health organization, it's much less. And so just getting some of those directions to say, we're going to really push forward this way in this direction. And we come back yearly, report that to the BOC, and we say we're good. If the sheriff's office, which quite frankly, after the Boardman Public Health Building is probably our worst case issue in our common operating buildings, we also should look at saying, okay, we need to start building that reserve for there, just like we've done with public health building, start putting money for the historic courthouse and those other types of things. And so we got 14 projects at $20 million a year. We got to prioritize down to a quarter of that in a lot of ways. And again, the nice thing is as this is a living document, if we suddenly have additional CREZ projects or SIP projects that go above and beyond, we now have a list where we just pick that out and say, we have an additional $2 million a year. Let's slide this project in and get that going. It was at, ready to bat. Now we're calling them up kind of thing. And we plug that in as we go forward. So, as we look at this, one of the questions is, where do we want to start with the ones that are really prioritized that we want to put our available funds to right now and push those others aside? That's where we'd love your input today. If you want us to continue to work and revise that and bring down our final recommendation on that down to this point, that's something we can work out as well.
So I'm prepared to go through these, you know, and some of it's to get what the committee's thinking was and why this ranked higher than others and different things. And some discussion, and I realized as the Heritage Trail is an example, really the 11 million proposed cost of that is kind of aspirational. With the long term, what would this look like, you know? And I think realistically, you take it in small bites. You know, if I were the king for the day on that project, you know, I'd love to see from the Irrigan Marina to like First Street and Irrigan there get paved. And that would be the biggest capital part of it. But then at the same time, what wouldn't take much money is where the old highway goes out through the refuge. Get the agreement with the refuge people. They could go out there and cut the sagebrush off the sides, but sweep the gravel off the deteriorating asphalt so it becomes a usable trail. Not a huge capital, but it's getting, you know, so then you're getting small chunks of it. And then probably the next chunk is from First Street to West 8th, you know, and make that not a paved at first because that's a lot of money to get that far. But let's get a solid gravel base down, you know, so you aren't spending $11 million at a time. You're spending smaller amounts, and maybe, you know, you're able to break up and get grants for these separate things. That, like I say, that's just an example.
Yeah. One thing, and I agree, this kind of does show a big chunk for the Heritage Trail. Megan and Bob chimed in just a little bit. They're from Park Resources. They're a group who's helps with funding and grants and exploring on this. Can you just can you chime in and just tells us the pros and cons with capital plans of, you know, definitely phasing out projects because we don't have the funds, all this and that. Is there any pros and cons to keeping larger chunks when you're doing the grant chase, or, you know, smaller projects as you chase grants?
Well, I think, I mean, I love the phased approach because it's harder to get, you know, huge grants to do everything. I think that what you've got here are projects that can be broken down into phases if it fits. I heard someone talking about, you know, this as a living document, and I think that's really appropriate and a good way to think about it, because that keeps it sort of dynamic, and then we can as a grant writer, we can respond to the opportunities that get put in front of us. And you know, we work really hard to try to forecast what those opportunities are going to be, but each presidential election and each, you know, really every new midterm election, there's a whole bunch of new variables. So the approach that you're taking makes a lot of sense to us. It's what we would ask for if we could, you know, wave our wand and make folks do things perfectly to align for us. So I don't think you need to be so specific that you're saying, well, this can only be a phased approach, or this is the big block. I think if you've got a good budget, then you can break things out and take them in pieces if that's the opportunity that presents itself. And I hope I'm answering the question that you're asking.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
so-
would add as well, that different projects are probably going to be a better fit for that, especially some of those ones where you are seeking maybe foundation funding or some of that community investment. Most of the foundations in Oregon are not doing massive, you know, investments in capital projects anymore, but they are doing smaller investments in parts of capital projects. So being able to kind of put together a funding strategy that utilizes multiple funding sources focused on those different elements is probably going to work really well with certain projects, especially those that are, you know, there to serve the community. Things like the Heritage Trail, the Anson Wright, the library. Some of those projects are going to be really appealing to maybe some of those smaller portioned funding opportunities than maybe a big single grant, if that makes sense. Sorry, my child just got home from school and came in right when I started talking, so that was poor timing. Excuse me.
One thing to me, where you kind of look at it is divided into two groups, your wants and your needs, you know. you know, and Eric, well, we can address the needs. I mean, everybody can say, my project, it's a want, but it's a need because everybody needs it. But, you know, a building that's falling down, how much maintenance are we putting into it? Okay, that's a need, you know, as opposed to a want. Now, that's not saying all the needs should go first, you know. But to me, that's kind of the way to look at it, you know, tackle the needs first, you know. And the problem with me looking at those is it's all anecdotal. Everybody, you know, I've just talked to this person and talked to that person, you know, and I like to get the person in front of me, you know, and find, or you know, you guys maintain all the facilities in the county pretty much, don't you? Your department, Public Works?
We assist. It is now under events, the
Okay,
facilities maintenance.
It's all, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And you can say, okay, we're spending a lot of money on maintenance on this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Or likewise, you know, a certain place was, we're completely outgrown our facility, we're parking equipment outside that we shouldn't. And that's kind of rises it up to the need. That's not to say that you just pass up an opportunity. Say grant becomes available for a want, it's lower on the list.
Yes.
It's like, move that want up. Because
Yes.
the money's available. I don't, but you know, I could look at these and I could make a statement without having the information about the facility. Except what I,
See.
yeah.
So I think we have a group, it seems like we've identified that the health department was in serious need. I think we identified that as a really tough tier.
That's what I was counting on this group, and that's what's on the committee. That's why I was glad we had the committee, because I was counting on them doing that background.
I
How
think
bad's
we
the
did.
sheriff's office? You
Yeah.
know, they talk to the sheriff, they get the information. That's what I was hoping, rather than. I mean, that's, if I'm asked to prioritize these, that's what I want.
I think we're prepared
I
to.
wanna talk to them,
Yeah.
and I wanna talk to you
Yeah.
and Vince. People, you know,
Yeah.
the facilities in a park, it's running down, how much do you spend on it? Can you not use it anymore? Are they taking, not being able to have, you know, camps, so, you know, you see what I'm saying?
Outside ADA compliance, there's things
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
Yes.
ADA, okay.
I think we're prepared to.
That's a need,
With that, yeah.
that's a need, that's not a want.
And I think, I mean, Commissioner Peterson did a couple of them, like the public health one. But the committee did do outreach, discussed with most of the department heads. I mean, the one that we didn't talk with a single department head was this historic courthouse, but we have feasibility studies on that have helped to provide that. And so like Vincent is well equipped on several of the facility items, the park items, Eric with some of the facilities and public works items. And I'm pretty good with some of the others that we discussed. So
Okay. So we're tackling the politics of,
yeah,
is that right?
that's what
No,
comes back around. So, you know, looking at these, I mean, that's where, you know, again, we have, you know, fiscal year 2027, we kind of reserved 26 for some engineering studies and, you know, one of the grants that requires us to spend money on there, the fairground one. But those are kind of things that we need to turn down because we've got, you know, we've got the Christmas list and we have to fit it in the family budget more or less.
Now, would it be appropriate to look back at the spreadsheet? That was kind of what
Brianna?
we came up with.
Could you share that again?
Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. After we look at that again, I'll have a different comment.
And kind of to build on what Megan mentioned and from what you said with the Heritage Trail, this shows a big lift really quick, and that would be easier to diffuse it over almost a 10-year plan. Our challenge is we had something that came up. We got the feasibility, the study that we haven't even formalized with you. We got the sneak peek and we took some of that into this consideration. And we did take big bites on that one. And that would be an easier one to say, you know, with the $2 million we have, let's do a couple $100,000 projects and push that out and just pursue the heck out of a lot of grants as we take those steps.
I can forward you that. You don't need a picture.
David, here's the priority list that the team came up with.
Oh, so.
One
come
way,
back-
oh, sorry.
Were they going to speak to this?
I think she might, Brianna might have.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was thinking of just maybe starting at a high level on the ones that maybe don't have that you guys are all in agreement on of priority. If there's any that we could weed out, and maybe that brings the list down to a few that need to be sort of projected or reprioritized. Does that make sense?
So before we get started, I'm gonna get on my soapbox. Where are roads and bridges here? Because again, I'm gonna repeat, I know I've said it many times before, but we're committing discretionary dollars. And we have things that need to be fixed in this county that we can only use discretionary dollars on. So before we run out of sources of funding of discretionary dollars, I'd like to see those get fixed. Because if we used it for $96 million worth of projects here, and we don't have any new discretionary dollars coming in, how are we fixing the roads and bridges? That's the thing that I know everybody's heard that multiple times before. Because at some point, as the data centers come off of the tax abatement,
Yes.
we're going to have more general fund dollars coming in. I mean, this last year, what might show us $22 million, say $20 million, easy math. About 25% of that's the county's take. So that's, $5 million that the county has now that they didn't have 15 years ago. So and that's only like 2 data centers coming off. As more data centers come off, and granted, it's a few years out before they start coming off, the county's going to have a huge influx of general fund dollars that can finance these things that we cannot use on roads and bridges. So the money that they are paying us right now can pay for roads and bridges. But as they come off, can't use those dollars for roads and bridges. Kevin, sure, correct me if I'm wrong.
Currently, I think we've heard the message and taken that to heart. And every year for the last few years, we've been accumulating a reserve specifically for bridges and roads in the road fund. We are at the end of fiscal year 2026 projected to have $4 million in reserves specifically for this.
How many bridges will that fix?
A prefabbed bridge is probably about $450 a square foot. A 30-foot wide bridge by 40 feet long is going to be $500,000 just to buy the prefab. And then of course we have to install it. So prefab's the cheapest way to go. That will work for a lot of our bridge replacements that we need to. Others would be a potential complete rebuild. I think the ones like over Big Butter Creek and such, that's quite a big bridge, would be expensive. But the majority of our bridges could probably be done with a prefab, and some others could be replaced with culverts. Actually, a lot of these bridges in the county were built before they had 6-foot culverts. Now we have that opportunity, but the answer is a lot of money. It takes,
So, no, I'm not going to discount what you're saying, Kevin. So, yeah, we're putting money away. But I don't think that makes a dent in and I understand we have to wait until the bridge master plan is done, but I don't know that $6 million really makes a dent.
We can certainly increase the rate that we're accumulating reserves. It will take from other.
Right, and I recognize I'm 1 or 3 votes here, so.
Well, you gotta think. Took care of things before there were data centers, even here. You know.
But that's why we're, part of the problem where we are, is that deferred maintenance.
No, and I agree, and we've always agreed on this. It's just not a total either or. I mean, there are still funds available in addition to the funds that may go away as 2 years down the road.
And there may be grant funds available for bridges.
There are. Yes,
It's limited and difficult, but there is.
there are.
And maybe what we could do is, that would be a task for Kevin and I and Eric, before we bring back the thing, is to come back with a recommendation of how much to continue putting into that fund and using from that fund for that until we have that built up as we consider these from the available
Well, you know,
funds.
that also may work into, if we think about a percentage, taking a percentage of the discretionary funds we're now getting through SIPs and CRES. And just, if they have a figure, allocate money to that. And then parallel allocate funding to this also, and attack it from that standpoint. Percentage of what we have discretionary goes to each, instead of mixing up the roads and bridges with this right here. You see, does that make sense?
We need to have that roads and bridges as part of this, if like an appendix or something, tying it all in. But yeah, if we could work out the portions that we could suggest to continue to build that while we spend on it.
I would, it may be easier to plan if we had a specific target in mind. You know, so if the board considered, you know, putting money away for roads and bridges, you know, an accumulation of a reserve for that as a capital project, you know, give me a target dollar amount a day, and we'll and a prioritization alongside the other capital projects. That way, if we don't have specific individual projects to go tackle, at least we're making headway on and meeting the board's goal for whatever amount of money and reserves you feel is appropriate to have. So once we have that plan, we can start moving forward. And just prioritize the accumulation of that reserve as a capital project along with the rest of the items on this list.
I think part of it too comes up to how often does it happen where you have an emergency? And you have to spend $500,000 because something happened to a whole bridge that you didn't expect was gonna happen. Does that happen very often? No, okay.
Has
So
happened.
if you set up a plan, it's gonna be, it's a pretty good shape, because you're not gonna have a big emergency. It's gonna suck up a lot of the funds in the air.
It can happen.
It can
Here's a
happen.
local
Yeah,
example.
yeah, it's-
City of Umatilla, they had a bridge wash out
Yeah.
10 years ago, and it was
Well, they said one that last year, wasn't it, up out of Mountain Freewater?
Yes.
yeah, I just have a little more familiarity.
Yes.
They've been
And a few years ago on I-5 north of Seattle, on I-5, that bridge collapsed. So it can happen. I have one bridge I'm significantly concerned about. I think it's going to really help when the bridge master plan is done. I'm sorry it's not here. It should have been here for this project, and it's going to be something is a high priority once once we have the engineer of
Let me
record.
ask the staff, you got this, and do you think the roads and bridges should be integrated into this?
Yes.
Right up on it? We should be looking at it right now.
For a complete capital improvement plan, yes.
Okay, but us trying to prioritize them is early.
Well, at the same time,
Well,
while
if we-
deferred maintenance on the roads, we've had deferred maintenance on the facilities.
So, to your point, Dave, we would move forward with prioritizing, especially, you know, if the idea was to, Kevin says, give me a target, dollar, time, and your idea of percentage or whatever. So then the money that is left over that we're putting to buildings and whatnot would be prioritizing that fund the money.
Or if you want to prioritize it, you just lay out the plan and we'll.
I mean, basically, you're on two piggy banks, roads and bridges and buildings. Yeah.
I mean, ballpark, we said, agreed that there was $4 or $5 million coming in that we can put the capital projects every given year. In addition to whatever reserves we have. If we said we want to put $1 million to roads and bridges, we just take that out and now we're looking at $4 million for Kevin and I as we get this prioritization here and plug the rest of it in.
So the other thing, Dave, is, as the tax base keeps increasing, that's gonna be dollars that we can't spend, roads and bridges, so that will go into this fund here, the piggy bank for buildings.
Sure, and that's where Mike Gorman's gonna have to, well, he didn't have to, maybe we can sit down. But if he's gonna have to tell us when two projects, because they should be, like Sugar Flat should be coming on in a year or two, shouldn't it?
Should be.
On the general,
Yeah.
and how much is that gonna be, Mike?
Hopefully they re-energize and go forward and it'd be awesome.
I think the most helpful thing would be, given the need for the future need for roads and bridges and this, list of other capital needs. Tell us, staff, what you want to happen, and then we can put together the plan financially to make that happen. And if we can't, or if it's going to require bonding or some other mechanism, then we come back and say, all right, well, the reality is, I know this is your number 2 project, right behind finishing the circuit court, but we're going to have to do this to accomplish it. But just understanding, like, what are those priorities that the board wants us to really focus in on and target, and put together the financial plan to accomplish. And then we'll figure out and come back with a recommendation on how it should be financed.
Well, as far as, prioritizing, I think if we had Eric's bridge plan. And then, of course, we gotta deal with politics, but we are the politicians here. Sure, wonderful job.
So I'm ready if you want to kind of go down through the list and we can talk about the projects they have, Dave.
Sure, no, that's fine with me. No, I just wanted to know the limitations of my prioritizing is I have not talked to the people or did a deep dive into a lot of these facilities. The only information I have is anecdotal and what I see here. With politics, I understand that because I've heard it for quite a while.
I think everybody's in the room, right? Let's do it.
Let's, could I please add, the discussion from the beginning of this capital improvement plan, roads came up right away. Equipment came up right away because it's so expensive, and even the sheriff's fleet. And we discussed about providing them as an appendix because we know every year historically, at least last 8 years, roads has been doing $800 to $1 million in equipment every year. That we're expecting that for a while. The maintenance on roads to maintain what we have is $800 to $1 million every year. That's not going to change. And then the sheriff also has his annual that doesn't change. So that's why we were going to provide those as appendixes, because we're expecting those every year.
Okay, well, I think Kevin has a good idea, a good plan laid out. So we can go ahead, just like Jeff does, and start going through it right now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Really, the first one, I guess, for negotiation or talk about is the fair flood mitigation. So, I guess I see it and it's a couple $1 million, if I remember right. Yeah, almost $3 million. That seems like a big bite,
And this is one where, Business Oregon flood mitigation does have funds and grants available for. That's how the port's paying for the one at the mill site. What our eligibility would be compared on fairground rather than a possible industrial thing is a question. But that is a great question because that's one where about $80,000 for a feasibility study, then you get on a grant thing, but it determines the whole master plan for the fairgrounds.
So that's where I personally, without hearing all the discussion when I read through it, seems like doing the feasibility study, spending the 80 grand upfront, it tells us, can we mitigate the flood? What would that look like? And then once you have that, then you can go start applying for grants. So, personally, I'm comfortable with the 80 grand up to 100 grand to do the feasibility study, and then we come back. What does that really look like? And start going applying for grants. And admittedly, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but to me, spending, because the fairgrounds here is roughly $5 million worth of spend. I'd rather spend $5 million on the full courthouse than down to fairgrounds. That's a building that we use every day. And what I read here in the reports is that, we've got the mortar coming out between the rocks, that's gonna let water in, it's gonna cause problems. And we have possibly rock down below the soil that's deteriorating. We need to get a foundation under it before something happens to it. Holes in the roof, or the sheet metal up there and they could see daylight through. It's gonna let water in, it's gonna cause wood rot in the roof structure. To me, spending the $5 million on the whole building, something that we use all the time, is a better spend of $5 million at the fairgrounds. That being said, again, I can support the $80,000 to get the study done down there, so that then you can go apply for grants. So if I were ranking, I'd probably put the courthouse higher, other than the $80,000 at the fairgrounds. That's my commentary.
Well, I think because without the long-term plan, then you're just kind of grab bagging it, as far as the fairgrounds. You're okay, we'll spend $2 million here, and then, well, we're gonna do this here. Where do these come up with? Just people's notions or ideas, see, but if you have, go ahead. I agree with that. That doesn't mean the 80,000 gives you an idea of where your capital improvements funds are needed.
Yes.
And can go. So,
If flood mitigation is even possible.
Yeah. And the problem with flood mitigation, it's always possible depending on how much money you want to throw into it. We can move a building. But yes, but again, that gives us an understanding, is it the $3 million here, and and it would confirm how much we could anticipate, hopefully getting a grant to.
yeah, but you have to throw in is there timelines on some of these projects that you have here for the fair. I mean, they have to be started, completed,
Yeah.
And if you plan too long, you lose opportunity.
That's true. So, yeah, the Dance Hall Arcade project is, one that we have funding in place for largely. That could be taken care of. They got it a little bit higher, just depending on how much of a scope it has. I think we sent them the whole scope of the revisions, so that's something that we can work on. The Fair Stadium stabilization, those are all fair projects. That is one where it's a safety concern that we might lose some of that stadium and some of the supporting areas if we don't get that addressed.
So on that one, when they talked about sources of funding, didn't see the school district mentioned. And the school district is the main one that uses that facility.
Yeah, and it's more or less it's a lease of the county property by them. It more or less, they just take care of the maintenance of the field. And in lieu of that, there has been talk in the past about having bleachers, or the stadium seating done before events with the school, and they kind of threw their hands up and said, no money. But that was all before the bond passed. The bond, this is not listed in the bond, but it might loosen up some other money that's available. So those are things we could explore.
Maybe going forward, we need to reassess our lease there, that they're responsible for these facilities, that they're the users of.
The lease is pretty loose. If you read the lease, it's not as tight as it should be.
More or less when it comes up again. 27 or is it further out?
I think it's further out, but I
And
don't remember entirely.
we can always reopen it. So,
And this isn't necessarily tied into, the capital improvement plan, but when I look at some of the pictures of maybe it's the restrooms and stuff. And in a sense, I hate to say it, but did our facilities fail us in that, I would assume that especially the month or so before fair starts, they're going around and checking things out, that they didn't look at, because the pulling away the gravel from underneath the concrete slab didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for
No,
probably.
if I remember right, those facilities were not put in place by us.
Sure, but if we own them and we're gonna have to fix them, when we were seeing the gravel coming out from underneath the.
We can always condemn them and have the school be responsible for them.
But my point was that when we were walking our grounds, nobody noticed that and said, hey, or get me a load of gravel down here so I can
Oh, I'm
fix this where.
sure it's been like that for a while.
That's my point.
Yeah, I know what you're
Well,
saying.
I was saying yes, before Vince got here. But agree, I noticed that the gravel was coming out from under there and didn't address it. It's just
If no one says anything, they kind of tend to look away.
and we've had places where they've thrown a Jersey barricade, expecting that to help Band-Aid approach, not enough weight to hold back the hill. So, yeah, and again, I think there's a combination of sweat equity kind of on these kind of things. If you look at the restrooms over there, the big restrooms, I mean, they're all, community pride, sweat equity, and build accordingly, same with Benson Wright. And then just deferred maintenance of, well, who really owns this? We don't have enough money, just let it ride. And that's the things that we gotta step up and stop, or we're gonna be spending tons of money. So.
I said what I want.
Okay.
May
Um,
I add a
we're-
quick thing real quick, just from a funding perspective?
Sure.
I just wanted to add that the more spaces are used by like the general population and especially young people, it really just opens up a lot more funding opportunities. The narrower you get on some of those use spaces, that's where from the fundability piece it became harder to find funding sources. And so just thinking about that partnership with the school and the kind of that use space or the usage of that space, just thinking about the more open and broad you can make the use of some of these spaces, the more opportunities there will be for funding. So just like planting that seed as you all continue exploring these projects.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we look at, like, they just are built on that sheriff's office. We're looking at putting a training room in there that other could use. And that could qualify us for some OEM grant funds, which normally you wouldn't get anything for safety building. And so just looking at and exploring all those options, and it doesn't really get captured on that, just that black and white spreadsheet right there, but it gives us a, overall project. Did you pull that back up, Brianna?
Yeah, and I just wanted to do a quick time check. I had this going until 2:30. Is that correct, or do you guys go longer?
We're gonna be.
We're going to be longer. If you need to jump off, I can share that spreadsheet and report back to you.
Yeah, however, I can probably stay a couple extra minutes if needed, but however you would like me to do it, I am. I've got
All
it
right.
pulled up for the time being, and then yeah, if we want to switch, that is works for me.
So we shall next.
This is kind of under Eric's because it's at the airport, but
Sure. Currently, the facilities, maintenance shop is the old hangar at the airport, which, according to FAA regulations, we're not supposed to be there using that as a facility shop. In addition to that, for years, facilities, manager's been, in need of, additional storage. We do not have sufficient storage for um, office furniture, all kinds of different materials, building materials often get thrown away because we have nowhere to put them. So the idea is to build a new facility that would give them a place to work and meet, and payroll, that sort of stuff, but also storage where assets aren't just thrown away because we have nowhere to put them. In addition to that, an idea was to add small lockers or, something separate for each department to store their things in as part of that building. The idea, we do have some potential property to use at the south transfer station. There's property up high. There's quite a few acres up there. Might be able to build that facility there. And we're looking at a prefab building, metal style building.
So what all do they use in the shop building, I mean, so what functions do they carry on?
What functions?
Because I mean, if you got the hangar shop, it isn't that big and we're talking about a 10,000 square foot facility here.
So they store equipment like there's a genie lift that they have. They have locks, the keys for all the buildings. So they have the master code. They're able to cut keys. He does his time cards or time sheets in that office. Although they've moved down here for some of it to the old loop garage or bus garage. They are in need of other storage for vehicles and work. They do welding, they do all kinds of other things. They also store equipment, or not equipment, but supplies. So like janitorial supplies. I know that there's different locations in which they store supplies because they're not able to fit it all in one location. And so
They have things stashed away all over the county.
true.
Lots of stacks of filters,
So yeah,
ceiling tiles, tons of stuff like that. Lots
Yeah.
of wood materials.
we've got Connex boxes, the holding records that would go in that facility.
It's like I said, just 10,000 square feet, it's a big shop.
It's not just, this is more or less facility shop and storage. That's there, and so that's you're right, it's got the hangar, we've got a trailer on the side that's a box that's been done for storage. They've got a small wood shop in there. They're pretty tight in there, but also
I'm not saying
spread
that they
out.
don't need more, but just in 10,000 square foot shop building.
So the conversations initially was we need facilities. We need a place to store stuff. And that was all we talked about, was a building to store stuff. Now we find out regulations by FAA, oh goodness, we're not even supposed to be in there doing anything. So then it came storage plus workshop. 10,000 square feet.
That's 100 by 100 building.
Yeah, they're gonna fill it up pretty fast. They'll fill it up. You think about all the stuff that's stored at the fairgrounds that's really rat infested. I mean, they have stuff held up all over the place.
yeah.
So then again, I'll jump ahead a little bit. Then we talk about a new facility for the weed department and, another 10,000 square foot building. But where I really see duplication there is that each one has a conference room, each one has a break room, each one has restrooms and stuff. And, you know, it's not on our list, but I know that the first time we talked about this, you talked about new admin building for your department. Yeah, it just seems like, can't we consolidate and have one big building where we have one conference room, we have one break room, we have one set of restrooms? And it just seems like that'd be so much cheaper for construction and ongoing operations of it, you know? You have one electric bill because you don't have a basic service charge, and granted, that's little, but I mean, everything adds up. And so why not consolidate, you know, one bigger building, and then we aren't having duplication of conference rooms, because the conference room isn't just an empty shell. You're gonna have tables, you're gonna have chairs, you're gonna have monitors. I mean, it's just, it goes on.
I think that for me, the big challenge has been able to find property that small around here. Meaning, and I say that because everything so much is agriculture. So we have property at South Transfer Station. We have property, to your point, we have property in Public Works. I would love to have everything consolidated there. And even, you know, the facilities maintenance manager close by, because we do a lot of work together. But it's the space at Public Works, how much will it hold? I mean, just I know that it'll hold space for the weeds facility or maintenance facility, but there's not room probably for both unless we go up. And that's a good question.
Administration offices.
Yeah, we
up above.
Yep. But it is the square footage of property is what I have been seeing as the challenge. I'd love to have it all in one spot.
But if you cut down on duplications of offices, break rooms and everything, your square footage of your building need goes down.
There's a potential to get more property near Public Works. I haven't talked to that landowner in a few years, but a few years ago they were interested in selling. So there's opportunities that we could look into.
Again, these are the things as I read through it come to my mind.
Yeah. So it'd be to your point, admin, you know, Public Works, facility shop, and weeds, could they all go on the same property at Public Works? Potentially. Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. County College, we go and, you know, had the one weekend where we were at the Benton County Public Works, and they kind of have their campus. But yeah, that's something we could look at. And even if we were to look at a temporary facility at facilities off the airport, so we don't trigger any
Sure.
FAA issues, and then do a bigger plan and plan out a little bit further for weeds and facilities.
Yeah, weeds is not. By the way, I'm trying to change the name to vegetation management. Yeah, it's kind of a goal of mine. Anyway, the weeds, they're doing fine where they're at. You know, we can hang out where we're at for a while. It's not dire. The facilities, I think, is much more important to figure out as far as priority goes. Between those two.
I think, I thought the purpose of the discussion is, because we're looking at long term, and the long term, what's in the best interest of the county? Consolidation, fewer square feet of buildings. My opinion, pretty good.
Yeah, separate buildings also silos us.
Yeah.
We really want to be siloed.
You do want to be siloed?
I said, do we want to?
Oh,
Yes, I want to be siloed.
Vince wants his own office.
That Corey, he's no fun to work with. Keep him in the box.
Matthew, do you need
Yes.
anything else from me, or does the committee have any other questions?
I think right now we can make the discussions and let you loose, Brianna. Appreciate you being here, and I can just give you an update of tomorrow or so on the meeting. Which
Okay.
direction
Of course, and
Thanks.
send me a note if there are follow-up questions or things that you guys want to know more that I can help with.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Bob and Megan, same with you. If it sounds like we're just talking specifics and particulars, Love to have you involved, but if you have a better use of your time, we can understand.
Oh, I can hang out here a little bit longer. I know Megan, you're pushed for time. I was gonna hang on for another half hour just to just to hear what your priorities are and what you're thinking, because we're always looking at grant announcements and trying to figure out what's available. So I will hang out here and make some notes and once I leave, please feel free to throw questions at us and Brianna as well.
Yeah, thank you all. I'll let Bob handle it. You're in good hands. Thank you all so much. And I really look forward to seeing you all accomplish all these projects. It's very cool that you're undertaking this. So thank you.
If I could suggest, commissioners, let's deprioritize facility shop and week building as well, keep them on there, but kind of project them out and look at some options there. And just look at some temporary housing facilities to get us out of the trouble of FA. So, I do want to just throw a couple items out, like library museum roof replacement. It's a smaller project. We have
$300,000 as of the end of this year. It has been the intention to move forward with the replacement of the membrane over the existing flat roof now. That we'll have, and they do that for fiscal 27. If the option was a choice, obviously, then that's going to take some additional consideration because it's considerably more expensive. But
No, I think just fixing the roof that's there. I assume it's lasted, probably 20 years or whatever.
not more.
yeah, I mean, the age of it, but
Yeah. But that would be an easy one, which doesn't require too much more additional money that's not taken care of. If we were, and I would advise against the full roof replacement, just because we don't know what's going to happen with the library. They've already published their their capital improvement plan, and it's relocating. So we're going to have a 80-year-old building that's going to be not half empty, a third empty, with the museum being on the other side. So maybe we'll have some more offices.
Libraries moving now, obviously, we can't ask them to help fix the roof.
Yeah.
Vince down there inside the
Yeah, in fact, their lease was really weird. Says they do not, they take care of the inside, they'll split the inside, they won't do structural, so we're hands tied on it. From way back in 1950, whatever. So. The other one, the transfer station improvements. Eric, you want to talk about those?
Sure. Well, I put forward a project to improve the South Transfer Station, especially, but both, to levels where we can open up more days of the week for the public, and also discussed improving the equipment so that the attendants have the ability to move bins around. As you've heard me report in my public works reports monthly, is the struggles that we've had there and filling up quickly and sometimes not even being able to operate on Sunday. And so this project would include some pavement upgrades, additional bins, backhoes to be able to, like I said, move bins around, and potentially a roll-off truck to haul our own bins, as up north it's costing us about twice as much money to move those bins as the south bins. Just the way the contract is. So it would also include new scale shacks. The ones that are there now are the A-frames, if you haven't seen them. They came from that Rajneeshi compound down in Central Oregon and aren't really, they've been working okay, but You know, we can't utilize the walls. There's very little space. And I'm hoping for, as part of the south transportation improvements to drill a well, which would serve the road department. We're having issues in Lexington during the summer getting water. You've heard me report on that. That would solve that issue, and it would allow the transfer station to have a running bathroom as well. I think that's the extent of that project. Yeah, just improvements to provide better service to the public and open up some more days a week. The north transfer station is on leased property. I'm looking at if this project's approved, that scale station would be mobile. So that if and when something happens with the lease, we can take that with us. No, still would have to have we don't have water there. I have no intentions of putting water there, so we continue to use outhouse style bathroom there.
I would mention on the transfer station, we do have. So currently we cover the operating costs with license fee revenue from Bentley View. The last 2 years, and I haven't done projections yet, but I just want to put this out there. We have had $600,000 to $750,000 surplus, because I estimate the revenues pretty conservatively. So there's potential that the surplus there, especially if we plan for it, could cover a significant portion of that.
So money we've been collecting to take people's garbage there. It's the $650,000, and that would cover a lot of the improvements we're doing. That's great. And I suspect that, you know, once we get using all the time the scale, and I assume our revenues are.
We also are very confident that revenues are going to go up. You know, there's no question on the weight, and you know, there was often when we're looking at revenues from the week's garbage tickets, when you see $10, you know, for 30 loads in a row, you kind of wonder if was accurate. And the answer is no, it was not. So we're pretty confident revenues are going to go up.
So it's something essentially it's not pay for itself, at least over time.
Be okay to put that as, since sounds like we've got a revenue source to keep.
I'm 70% certain. I think, like I said, I haven't done projections yet, but for that, but
in this meeting, so we can, yeah. Would that be all right?
Yep.
I would just like to put it out, we'll just take Heritage Trail and break that out farther and, you know, phase that out for, you know, even if it takes 10 years to really develop that all out.
You know, from my perspective, you know, segments and then getting the trail, and then we look at, you know, shelters and benches and things like that. Getting the surfaces primary, my perspective. Is I know I've shown you that, like, going doing First Street and 8th Street in Aragon, you're walking through cheatgrass and a sand pile. There is no trail.
Snaps nice little right up there. Then we have a pump track.
so on the Heritage Trail, we stopped. You know, the target was $2 million, and I stopped that in, I think, back 2024, 2025 when we hit that. And so I wasn't planning on continuing to allocate reserves until we had the master plan and some projects and a clear path forward and what that looked like. So
As I recall, this was pretty early when Dave and I got here.
right, like maybe that's one of the first meetings actually.
Too much, because I think it's only the two of us. I think Junior was here yet, so. Yeah, and I think that the idea was to get that $2 million so that was a matching amount
Yes.
to go apply for grants. So, If we've reached that, that's awesome.
Um, Anson Wright Shower Office Building. I would love to keep that on this list, but make it heavily grant optioned. And I don't know if Bob's still on, if he could address that. I mean, I think this would just be bringing that park up to the same level as our other two parks and possibly see more people using that as we have a bigger facility there, but kind of make it contingency on a good, healthy.
So
grant.
to add to that, we are trying to connect all the parks with road access. And so if there were newer facilities there, I think it would help.
Down there.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's great opportunity for parks funding. And that's definitely one where if we can break it down into, manageable pieces that fit the grant amounts that will be coming out from the state, I think there's great potential there. That's one of the things I feel so most optimistic about finding ready funding for.
So from a planning perspective, that stays on the list and we just seek grant funding, would there be a desire to allocate any funds or prioritize building a reserve? Us, or just wait and see what's available with grant?
So I think what would maybe be helpful, and maybe Bob would have an idea, is what would a typical match look like for a grant, And we work to allocate a match amount.
Any idea on that,
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, well, yeah, and it varies by program, but I think, a good 25% match, especially if it's cash. Cash is much more compelling than in kind or, land or something like that. But I would encourage you to keep it on the priority list so that when we write the grant, we can say it is a priority and the county has dedicated, this amount of funds to it. So I think that makes a much more compelling grant application than one where it's either low on the priority list or there's not much available cash.
Okay.
And I guess if we kept it on the project priority of, the 4 years out, if we're looking at like, 25% or so is that 20% would be $300,000.
25, $330,000, yeah.
So
Per
that gives a
year.
few years to build up to that amount. Yeah, if we kept it at year 4, 1. That's the direction you're looking for, is
Yeah.
you comment?
No.
Okay.
No, I like what you're saying.
Before I give you the big juicy political one, Eric, talk about the last one, electrical management.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So Public Works in Lexington, the property has evolved over time. We moved down there in 80 something from right over here where the fairgrounds are. And so buildings have been added over time, sheds, equipment storage, that sort of thing. And the hired the local electrician on a few projects like the fuel island and every time he comes to work with me, he talks about what a mess the electrical is coming in the property and something should be done. So I've taken that more seriously since this opportunity came up to look at centralizing the power coming into the property for a couple reasons. One, so we can clean up and know what we have and what's feeding what and that sort of thing, but also for emergency management reasons and being able to have a generator so that we can still function when the power goes out. Biggest needs, of course, is maintenance in the shop, some office work, and fuel. Fuel is the biggest thing. So that's what this project is. I believe, if I understand correctly, power's coming into that property in 3 different locations, which makes it really difficult to set up a generator. And so I'm working on that now. I've been haven't started yet, but will be working with Columbia Basin to find out what our peak usages are so that we can identify a correct generator in that. But that's essentially what we're trying to do. Clean up the electrical on that property.
There, we've got 3 different feeds coming in.
That's from what I understand. I haven't physically seen it. But yeah, that's what I understand. It's coming into the property.
So how many meters do you have?
Probably 3.
So that'd be 3 feeds.
Yeah.
So
We're all not completely clear. This is one of the reasons why we're trying to fix this is it's just unclear. We have water issues down there too, trying to figure out what's feeding it. But
Would the nature of that project change if there was a more consolidated approach for a public works facilities expansion to include the,
at that site, yes.
yes, absolutely good
as
point.
kind of rhetorical question?
That's
We all knew that was a yes, right? But-
Yeah, right.
Point that.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
So, I mean, and that's, I mean, the generator, possibly be able to chase, some grant funds for that. But pretty much it's a maintenance improvement, to ramp us up for future improvements and just making sure we're solid on power utilization.
So it'd be interesting as to what your full load is, you know, what you do with Columbia Basin. Instead of, having a pad mount stationary generator, I mean, I watch auction stuff all the time, and you can buy a 20, 30, 50 kW gen set that's on a trailer for not that much money, when we talk about. So really what you need is a transfer switch installed at your facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Moving around. The sheriff and Steve had gotten some older huge generators from a couple areas, and that were literally almost giving them away, but we just weren't in a position, power wise and other considerations to really do that. They're huge though, but they would take care of the town of Lexington almost. But it was there's opportunities to look at it and have a portable one. We might not need that in Lexington. We might need to wheel it up to here again. Be nice to have a switch so we can have power in 40 minutes. Yeah.
What I do want to avoid is a situation where the need for the generator someone decides that it's more important somewhere else and I don't have power public works during the emergency. So whether that means pull the axle out from under it, I don't, but those things do happen during emergencies. So
Axles.
Axle, yeah, that's what I thought I said. It doesn't have.
Sorry.
Both sides.
It's like, where'd that generator go?
Certainly it's up at Rory's house.
Yeah. So, but I've thought about the mobile opportunity as well and as an option.
Seeing like a 30 kW gen set with 2,000 or less hours on it. So for like $3,500.
So, okay. Brings us to historic courthouse, public health, sheriff's office.
I told you, my purview over like the fairgrounds should be spending the $5 million on the whole building that we use all the time. As opposed to something that we use, 1 week a year. And, I think you said, but remind me, Kevin, how much money have we socked away ballpark? For the old building?
So we have various projects aside from circuit court, about $6 million. So that's allocated.
How much was that?
$6 million. So some of that's allocated to, in the sheriff's office, some of it was allocated to public health, some was allocated, small amount was allocated to a transit facility. And I've just been kind of waiting for this process before we reallocate that, so, that's, and we get additional press funding, I'm almost certain that we've met our requirements for funding at 100% for the circuit court at this point. So any CRES distributions that we would be expecting for the remainder of the year, I've typically been just putting those and booking them into the CIP fund for capital improvement projects. So that 6 million could expand to 7 or 8 million, depending on what we see for the rest of this fiscal year.
We use that building all the time. The foundation falling out, but breaking other internal. The fissure shows the, we're on the steps and stuff, water gets in there and pretty soon you're gonna have a lot more.
Come to the public health and sheriff's office. I think we've got an opportunity in a lease situation or some kind of partnership with Shepherd or someone. It's gonna be complete. It's realized, get into conversations there. I mean, that would seriously reduce the cost if it's a lease. That type of approach. You know, would be a sort of the comes to building a new building would be, and set up and do a nice long-term lease. If we could do that, that'd be advantageous just for planning wise. We'd want to really have those conversations with Good Shepherd and make sure it's settled. But that could allow other public funds to be start building up for a sheriff's office building. The $15 million that we have on this for sheriff's office building is, I mean, it sets up a nice office building with a good training, large training conference room area that's desperately needed. I mean, it would even be, you know, if we needed to pull up an all-employee meeting for the county, that would be probably sized enough that we could go do it on the south end of the county. Be great for emergency trainings and just operations if necessary. But it also, one thing, I mean, you look at that, it's got the evidence base so they can drive vehicles in and secure and take care of it. So it's a fully operational modern sheriff's facility. Location wise, the sheriff had been open to considering other locations just to be a little more centralized. The idea was possibly in Lexington. They have infrastructure issues that they've got to get together. And so, but looking at that and possibly starting to put some money aside or do a feasibility study to flesh that out and really have the needs of what we want as we get close on that money. But that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, pretty much that will be fully on the shoulders of the county. I don't think we'd have a lot of grants outside of possibly emergency management for that large training / conference room.
Would we make it also an operations center, emergency operations center?
It would be nice to have. I mean,
I don't know what it would take to get that designation, but I mean, once you have that, then that probably opens up other funds.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So that I mean, those kind of things would be what we would pursue on that. And whether it's on the green space up where that's at, or if the sheriff and facilities do pull in some consultants to look at other locations, but we do have that green space right up there that could be.
Across the street.
Yes.
I think Sheriff Bowles is online.
Yeah, I'm here.
Any input on sheriff's office building?
Location.
Location, you mentioned the green area up here where we're at now.
Yes.
One of the issues I think might be one of the bigger issues with this building is our radio antennas for our emergency communications if we move the building down to a lower location, then there's gonna have to be a cell tower with the radio antennas and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big chunk of money there as well. That's one thing. I got to call into our radio person, Brett Mueller, to discuss what's our options there, and I'll report back when I hear from him.
Chair Bowles. I talked to you about this. What's your feeling on Lexington?
I like the idea of keeping the sheriff's office in the South County. I understand that land around Heppner area is hard to find. If this green area up here we have right now doesn't work, I mean, I'm thinking the green area and our existing parking lot, and we could park, down at the Station 2 and other areas while this is being done. And then when everything's done and transferred and all that, this building could be tore down and a parking area here. I think that would kind of solve the issue, and the issue with the antennas as well, because it works now good.
So your first choice would be where it is now. Well, same neighborhood. That'd be
Yes.
number two would be Lexington, right? Or
Yeah,
South.
wherever the county could find, property that would work.
Well, our experience here with daycare and circuit court building, property in Heppner is pretty tough to come by.
Yeah, it's tough.
So, from the political standpoint, and John, you might speak to this.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of political opposition to not having it up there. I mean, it's not like how many civilians do you have come in every day and, oh, now I'm gonna have to drive to Lexington? Do you have a lot of foot traffic through there?
Yeah, we use, this is open, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We provide services out of this building. And it's used for many, many different things. It's used a lot. So moving it, I mean, we have the annex in Oregon. I think that covers the north end pretty well. And having one in the south end, I think that covers the county. As long as we keep it in the South County, Heppner, Lexington area, I don't think there would be a huge issues. And building up here on this green area, I'm not sure what the neighbors would think about that. But I mean, I'm thinking, as long as it's a nice looking building and not some industrial looking size metal building or something like that, I hope they wouldn't have an issue with it.
Well, I brought a property out of public ownership and we set up a zone. I did the old school in Lexington and we zoned it half commercial, half residential because they have no zoning on them. Is that right, Matt? The public property has no zoning.
Yeah, but usually when you have public property, the usages are fairly unlimited. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Because I remember dividing that thing up. I asked the guy that's gonna buy it, I said, what do you want to do with it? And they said, they want half commercial, half residential. And that's what we did because it was start from scratch. But I just have a hard time wondering where the opposition is gonna come from. In that if it's the neighbors who would have that in the middle of a residential area, and then they would get upset because it's no longer there.
Right.
It's like you say, what gets put there? I mean, what if it was zoned residential, just like everything around it?
Yep.
Do you see, do you sense any public opposition to that?
I know when we talked about putting the shop that we have for vehicles and equipment down by the fire hall before we got that location, they didn't like the idea of the metal industrial type building going in there. My only concern about the Lexington area is the water and sewer.
They're working on it, but there's no definitive timeline yet. They're saving money for that infrastructure.
Yeah, I was on the Heppner City Council for 17 years, and I've been off for about 5 or 6 now. And that's been a project, like I said, 17 years ago.
So if we wanted to stretch our dollar, if public health could partner with Good Shepherd on their setup and almost do a lease agreement, I think that would be advantageous. The sheriff's office, possibly a further feasibility study to really kind of get a basic design and start putting the money away for it. And
So I have a question. I think Kevin brought this up, and I was just talking to Eric about it. Have we discussed a bond?
I was actually gonna make a comment. So I met with consultant from DA Davidson a few years ago, I think. Might have been right when you guys were you guys wanted potentially about different financing options for the circuit court building. And we had a long discussion about uses of bonds and
I was at that.
you were in that meeting, right? Okay. And he
Never
did,
mind for that meeting.
he did make the comment that there, I certainly don't want to make any representation about Morrow County residents and voters as a whole. But he said there's, certain, different levels of appetite for bonding and acceptance or willingness to see an additional tax levy. And public safety was at the top of that list. They were typically the most likely projects to be approved. That was just based on his experience and in the.
Here I go again. The fire hall. How is that financed? Do you remember, is that just a regular?
I couldn't say. I don't know.
Okay, because I helped work on the election for that. And it passed by a wide margin.
I think that, depending upon what you get it with the, just the addition of the school bond. How closely that passed. I mean, it's
16 votes.
Yeah, that was close. People are.
And
I just know how many people come through my business office complaining about how much they went up.
That's true.
I
He's,
don't
he's right.
I
Yeah,
agree a lot as well.
From a financial planning perspective, though, looking at the other projects, and even in recognition that if the county was going to finance that through accumulation of reserves, short of unexpected capital contributions through economic development efforts, it could be a significant amount of time because we would be committing other sources of revenue to projects that are a little bit nearer term. We decided to move forward with any of these. It limits our ability to
put money.
build reserves.
Yeah, we're sheriffs, we're total, it's just agreed across the board that a new facility is what, right?
I don't think anybody who's been in there argues the fact.
No, I
it
wasn't. I just
wasn't-
wondered what everybody else's thoughts were.
Our committee, the only building worse set up is the Boardman Annex. And neither of those buildings were designed for what we're using them for. And the specialty use in the sheriff's, it just doesn't pass the buck. I appreciate Sheriff Bowles and your staff for using it, and with the leaks and the HVAC issues that they've had to live with. And it's not a building I would want to drop a bunch of money into retrofit because it just doesn't fit the bill.
Well, let me ask you this, then, if we did go with new, what would you do with the old?
Rip it down. If it was, well, actually, if we built there, I would say we're demolishing that for parking. If we went to Lexington, possibly sell both those parcels for residential development, but I don't think we'd get a commercial location.
Well, that,
There's a sign.
the commercial part would affect the political.
Yes. And so you know, the state of the building, I mean, it doesn't have bays, so putting weeds or
I
facilities in it.
just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure everybody else does.
We're
And as
with
soon
you,
as-
Chair.
And when we get to the political world, you know, like, that's why I brought up the zoning part.
Yeah.
Because I think it, you know, I mean, you look around, it's all in residential. I mean, the schools are there, but. So it makes sense to, if you, and I think that would affect the political, and then there again, probably just that little neighborhood up there. You know, I don't see a town or a county-wide, anyway,
Yeah.
opposition to not having it in a residential area.
And possibly, you know, I mean, if we were to relocate from somewhere and not redevelop it there, you know, turning that into residential developable land. I mean, that's better than going up here. They've got the systems right there. They just have to hook in.
That's why I think it makes it more politically palatable. When you do that, you know, don't mess around and talk about office buildings or. Yeah, just go ahead, go residential, blend into the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Yeah, anyway.
So this would be one of the projects that I would look to see, just because of the condition of it, the fact that we don't have any reserves built into that one,
For the sheriff's office?
committed to it. Do we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we've got to start on the public health one, but this would be the one where some kind of financing option might be, you know, a consideration due to the import and the peculiarities of it.
You know, maybe I read it, or how much acres would it take for a sheriff's office? I don't know, acre, lots of.
Don't recall.
Is that addressed in here?
I think. Just says a 10,000 square foot building.
Well, parking, blah, blah, blah.
Right. I don't know how much the sheriff needs for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think we had
yeah.
lot sizes there.
I mean, and the reason I bring that up.
I want to
is
say
go
it was
back-
brought up in conversation, it was around 2 acres.
Thinking too.
How much?
Yeah, 2 acres. That's what I recall in conversation.
See, then you circle right back around to where we've been talking about Heppner since the circuit court building we were going to put in is. Where is that second row? I mean. When they wanted to put in a daycare center, they beat the bushes pretty good there too, and we, you know, we heard all about. Circuit court. They said, you explained many times to people. You know, they said, well, don't put it there, put it somewhere else, there is no somewhere else. That's why I tend towards Lexington. Unless you go to Heppner and say, okay, come on, 2 acres, it's not in a floodplain. You know,
But the neighbors aren't gonna come to.
if the neighbors aren't, yeah, they're not gonna get a petition up against it.
And I think if it was located in Lexington, it would be real easy to explain. I mean, in Heppner, there's just not land available.
No,
You just don't have
That's
the
just-
options.
and that kind of forces the discussion, the political discussion. And it's been well vetted around town, I think, it's out in the open. Both the daycare, which has got acquisition of where they're ended up, and our circuit court, which was very well vetted. Has brought that out in Heppner, that there is no land available. It's well known. So if a decision was made to move it to Lexington, the political fallout. I mean, I don't see how anybody would defend. It wouldn't be as bad as it would might be 5 years ago.
And so this one might be, again, one of those ones where we pay, whether fiscal year 27, 28, do a feasibility study, which includes, you know, looking at Lexington or, you know, North Lex or whatever, and to vet out the infrastructure and water and sewer and that would be impacted. And then come back with a plan that has a little bit more information to it. It's a great starting point, but vet that out a little bit more and then consider financing options as necessary. We'll make sure it's before December of this next year, so Jeff's still on the hook for making a decision.
Please do. Gotta give for going away.
The current sheriff's office might make a good library, and it's right by the school.
So,
Hey, that's good thinking because library's kind of low key benign operation.
Mm-hmm.
It's darn near a resident.
And a little park right next to it.
Yeah.
um, I've kind of went through these items and I have some notes on all 14 of them. And I think I have kind of a feel where we could get with the consultant and Kevin and kind of drill this down a little bit more. It's gonna reduce the list quite a bit, and then the expense of it. I think we have some direction. If that's it, unless you have more questions or discussions on it, commissioners. No. Said everything I wanted to. Again, I do appreciate the efforts of the committee. They covered for
That's
me
great.
a bit while I was out, and so they've done a great job. And they did a lot of footwork on going and asking questions, and Commissioner Peterson was heavily involved as well. It was a good effort as we worked through it, and we've learned some lessons. So after we get set for this year, before we're coming back in the fall, we might come to the commission just to massage that policy from lessons learned.
Yeah, no, I would welcome that. Yeah, come anytime back. So Nick, kind of give us a rundown where you're gonna go from here with this game.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, first of all, we are going to narrow this down to more actual, we're not gonna have outside of the circuit court, we're gonna reduce down the coverages so it's a little bit more palatable, more $4 to $6 million per year type investments or building up reserves. A couple of ones we are going to look at is, and this might be coming back with another study, is just looking at the public works area, see what we can do to develop a consolidated campus, not to reduce redundancies on items for facilities and weeds, and the non-siloed option that Vincent's championing. We will be looking at the library roof replacement, not the full rebuild on that. We will proceed with the flood mitigation study, and then to get a fuller fill of those types of items and position ourselves for grant funding on that. The Southwest transfer, that's pretty much just with the look and forecast, looking to be funded from the Finley Butte revenues there. And whether we do that in a year or two, just based on, so we don't hamstring ourselves on other things that are funded out that. We'll be breaking out the Heritage Trail over more years, possibly up to 10 years. I mean, portion of that would be the Boardman to Tower Road.
That's
be
way out there.
Yes. But this other one, see if we can break it out, even if it's a placeholder and saying a couple $100,000 a year or even $1 million or so based on the reserves we have, and pursue grants and just continue to pursue that. Anson Wright, we're going to keep it on the list, but prioritize grant funding, build up to that 25% and work so we get that grant funded. The other items, the fair, we do have, fair mitigation, the flood mitigation study. The other fairgrounds items are, so we didn't really come to a conclusion on the fair stadium stabilization. The dance hall arcade project, kind of scoped that down to the funding that we have. And fair stadium stabilization, that's a question that I still have. The public works, kind of still set that out year 5. And the public health building, we look at possibly the least option, really go forward with Good Shepherd for discussions there. And have the historic courthouse seismic upfit as a priority to keep that going. And such.
Kevin, is there something on your end, possibly in structuring of the SIP agreements or anything like that, that we should think about or could do to maybe think about this percentage thing we're talking about?
So I'm a little concerned that it's up to you on how you want to do it, but I think it would be better for us to manage it if we had a dollar amount and a timing target, rather than I'm concerned with, if there was a blanket, if we get excess, an unplanned distribution from credits or something, that X percent goes here, 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 here. I'm just worried that might limit our flexibility a little bit, but
Okay, so, all right,
yeah, so I mean, it did make me think of another. I did have another thought though. If and this is more along the lines of permanently dedicating funds for use that and wouldn't be able to be undone. If there was a provision in a CREZ or a SIP agreement that certain contributions were dedicated solely for the purpose of roads, bridges, or a certain function, then legally the current board or future board can't modify that. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
what do you think about that?
So that would be something that, you talked about, or at least the way I understood what you were saying early on, talking about financing. If you obligated those funds over a 15-year period, to go to repayment of a loan instead of a bond, that would be permanent, that you have those funds.
If the agreement was in place, then you could show that as you went to bond or loan.
And there's that would be the dedicated repayment source, and we would.
I mean,
I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to a finance consultant probably on that, because we would want to essentially pledge the revenues from that SIP agreement as to the repayment of the note. Is that what you're suggesting?
So full faith and credit in the county.
That's what I think. I think it'd be the full faith and credit of the county, but internally, we would identify that source to make that payment. Because
If
the
you did it
lenders
in the
always,
SIP agreement,
Yeah.
I think that would be fantastic.
because that,
Yeah.
it's like you said, then
You can.
whoever the yahoos are up here can change it.
Yeah, if you did it, so if it
I
was
took
done.
myself in that saying.
If it was done in the SIP agreement, so we have the examples for the STEM and STEAM contributions to the school
Yeah.
districts. That's come contractual every year. We get that $1 million comes off the top, and it goes to the irrigated Morrow County school districts.
Now, you're considering that internal.
No,
No, I didn't think so. Okay.
that's
I
what I'm saying.
sure.
As long as it was done contractually.
Yeah.
I guess, and I'm not an attorney, but short of. I don't even know if there's an ability to renegotiate an SIP agreement once it's in place, but
Both parties would have to.
I mean, it would be pretty dark to change it. And then those revenues would have to be used for that purpose.
Well, those STEM agreements are there and they.
And whether that's, like you said, to build reserves or to fund a project.
And then the reason I ask is because there's a good chance we might have some coming up.
Yeah, I think that would be, because then, we could take a full faith and credit agreement for
There's
financing.
some SIP agreements.
And, but we have a dedicated revenue source for it. That's a great plan.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're also gonna be talking more tomorrow now.
I think our partner
So as long as it was enough to recover the.
Yeah, but is that the general term?
No, for a facility, you'd be talking more like a 30, 25 to 20, 30 year note typically, but 15, I mean, you can structure it pretty flexibility.
And you figure out how much money you can borrow, it's, pay back with that.
So there's some creativity that, I think in the past, the county hasn't applied in that, and we've done a pay-as-you-go. We've got very small, debt service, and not to say I want to swing us full into debt usage, but, it's a tool. And we can look at it, consider.
Well, I mean, just to circle back to the SIP amount. When do you think you'll have this pretty much done and ready to be approved by the DOC?
You know, my original plan was hoping to get this before you on the 18th. That's gonna require a little bit of a push on consultant and me and Kevin. I mean, we've got the project's information, it's just chomping it in little bits where we can digest it and look good on it. And again, some of these are to say, hey, $2 million for Ensign Wright, but we'll just keep pushing that down until we get that grant. So I would still like to shoot for the 18th. That's caveat. We've had a couple things come up finance wise, and which is a priority outside of the ERP and that, but I'd still like to shoot for the 18th. Just to be able to our budgeting process for fiscal year 27.
Would it be advantageous, Jeff, for us to have this when we go, if we have a joint meeting of the board? And say, hey, you know.
Oh, when we have our SIP negotiation with.
So, hey, you know, you guys are part of this county too, you use the sheriff's, or whatever, you know, and have this laid out. And say, okay, you know, how much are you guys gonna participate in this? Would you, you know, are you guys?
This is
That
what the
makes
county
sense.
plans to do with their money. So, you know, what you take out of our hand is less that we can do these projects. with. And I think that even what we have now, Dave, is a good thing to say, here's what we're gonna do with our money.
Yeah,
How much are you gonna take away from these projects?
exactly. So that's what I'm thinking of having, hold off on having a big event until we get this. Cause it's in, the way it's laid out, it's really nice being able to, as a presentation.
Yeah.
So even without the final, Dave, I think that what we got here, because we aren't changing it substantially, it's just trying to, what are manageable size bites that we can take out.
Yeah.
We aren't taking really anything off the list. How are we going to accrue money and prioritize to pay for it? Well, again, we can flop it on the table and say, so which one of these don't you want to fund?
Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah.
Compelling story.
So, you know, to your point, I don't think we have to have the final before we would have.
Correct. Okay. It's, yeah, I think it's shape. Yeah, it's pretty.
I mean, I don't staff this down the road for 6 months, but you know, personally, I can understand if there's more compelling things that we can't get it in 2 weeks, that it takes until the first.
Cause I'm trying to go back and forth with them now, talk to two people on the board, setting up this joint meeting. So I wanna set it up after we get confident we're ready to go with this. You think we're ready right now?
I do. Did you hear that we're going to take anything off of
No,
here?
that's true. Okay, okay.
It's just how do we pay for it? How do we
You
prioritize?
set this thing up as a slideshow to present.
We can.
Tell our consultants, they should be able to do that.
Well, we've got their contract set up, and Kevin and I are pretty creative when it comes to PowerPoints. So,
Well, anyway,
yeah.
how would you do it? Would you do the first, you do 5 years and you weed some of these out? Anyway.
No,
Think about that.
No, I think that that one slide that you started off with, that, you know, year 1 through 5, and here's how what each thing costs.
yeah.
And then just to separate each one for some additional, understand the scope and the breadth of each project.
Yeah, we could almost take just the first 16 pages of this and give it to them for reference, not all the supporting documentation, and then have a 5, 6 slide presentation to summarize things. So be happy to do that. Getting into the SIP thing, making sure, if we are doing it to capital improvements, if we're doing it to roads and bridges, those are things just to say, we're looking to make improvements.
Yeah,
Let's make sure the SIP not a cash grab.
That doesn't lend itself quite to this like these do, because yeah, anyway. And if you do what you said, a shorter slide presentation. And we have that ready, we might be able to use that for other purposes. To show the public what we're doing. From the political standpoint, and you can take it around to chambers and say, hey, if it's concise and not hard to read while you're sitting here,
And
10 feet away.
And that's the ideal goal of having a capital improvement project. We aren't sitting on a $65 million golden egg. Quite frankly, that doesn't exist. And what we are doing, we're putting to public improvements to make sure things are happening.
Yeah, and here they are,
That's-
and they're
that's-
clear. Public can look at it while they're having a luncheon somewhere.
Yeah, and that's the whole goal of the CIP.
Okay, are we wrapping this up? Anything?
No.
So I'll just reiterate what you said earlier today, Dave. I think it may have been before everybody was in the room, but thanks, and I appreciate what the report came out here, like we're talking about the slides here, they got the picture and that's to Dave's point, what we want to be able to take around to people. So be able to get this pulled together and what the costs are. I think that's really important.
And I sensed from the consultants up here that they've been down this road before. This isn't their first rodeo.
No, but that's why you hire consultants.
Well, to do stuff like this, they don't always know the best way to convert this. See, this is not something I would put in front of a Chamber of Commerce luncheon.
No, not yet.
So that's where the consultant has experience of, hey, also, can you do that? Do you understand what we're wanting here to present? You see?
Yeah.
And I sense that they have understood that they might have done that before.
Mhm.
Why?
And we'll have some additional talks with Brianna. We're still planning on a meeting next week to distill this down the right way. And like I said, this was a draft. There's still some spit and polish that we'll be putting in. And I will ask her about her approach on a even more consolidated point type slideshow. If she's
Simplify.
Yep.
Sometimes technical type people.
We just have to get the prioritization one step further down, and we have that direction from you. So do appreciate that. And again, want to recognize the committee. They did a lot of work. When our consultants came in, they were surprised, very happily surprised at the starting point we were able to provide them. And that just goes back to our committee members who went out and hustled and asked a bunch of questions. So hats off to them.
Hey, anybody else? Okay. All right, well, I guess we'll call the work session adjourned. If there's nothing else.
Too late.
I know.